Yo, ho ho ho, and Merry Christmas. I want to welcome you back to Son of a Preacher Man. As always, I am your host, the Soapman himself, your boy, Troy. I want to thank you for joining me this Christmas Eve 2021. Just a couple announcements before we get started. The first announcement is it's the end of one year and the beginning of another one is fast approaching. Just after the new year, I will be making a big announcement here on my channel. Because you know Soapman like to bring the new year in with a bang. You know what I mean? So be on the lookout for that. Second announcement is if you're new to this channel, please make sure to hit that like and subscribe button. I would most appreciate it. The last announcement has to do with my last video. Now, in my last video, I introduced my mom to my viewers. I talked about how she pointed out a mistake that I had made in a prior video. And since her taste of fame, she's really been unrestrained and off the hinges. It seems she's designated herself editor-in-chief of my videos. And now, just like a bad dream, she's popping up all over the place, wanting to point out mistakes and inaccuracies that I've made in my videos. Now somebody really has to do something about this woman and restrain her. Because it's just like I told you in my last video. She's power hungry and maniacal. And once she gets started, there will be no stopping her. But I gotta give it up to Moms. She was right. I did make a mistake. Let all hail the queen. Okay, so in my last video, I talked about how Joseph played a trick on his brothers. And he accused them of being thieves and spies. He demanded that they bring their youngest brother, Benjamin, which was his younger brother, and their father, Jacob. And my mother pointed out that no. He only demanded that they bring his little brother, Benjamin. See, Benjamin was the younger brother that he had from his mother, Rachel. Jacob's wife, Rachel, had Joseph and Benjamin. And initially, when all this occurred, Benjamin hadn't been born yet or had just been born. And Joseph didn't really know him. So he asked to see Benjamin and not his father, Jacob. Jacob didn't come along until later when Pharaoh gave the family permission to migrate and move into Egypt. So my mother wanted to point out that it was only Benjamin that he demanded and requested to see, not his father initially. Okay, Ma, you was right. But it's a perfect segue into today's lesson. Because today's lesson is very important. It's the premise I'm going to use for my next two videos, so I'm going to need you to pay especially close attention. I'll, in the meanwhile, try to do my best and not make any mistakes. And so, here we go. Joseph and the Hyksos, part 2. Now in my last video, we talked about Joseph. We talked about his story and how he wound up in Egypt. His brothers sold him into slavery. And how he rose to power, becoming the second most powerful man in Egypt. We also showed how famous and world-renowned archaeologist Manfred Betak had dug up some evidence in a city called Avaris that suggested that not only was the Joseph story real, but that he could have lived there. He dug up evidence of, I think, of Joseph living in this city. Of course, you know, that's up for debate. So that's where we're going to pick up. We also hinted in the last video, we hinted around on these people called the Hyksos. And we're going to delve deeper into them in this video. But before we get started with any of that, let's play a game. I'm going to say a word, and you tell me the first thing that comes to your mind when I say that word. Okay? Pretty simple, easy game, okay? Okay, so here we go. The word is Egypt. Okay. Now, what were you thinking? Come on, you can tell me. Was it sand? Was it the desert? Was it the desert sand? Maybe with a big fat pyramid on top. Or are you the more fantastical type? The more mythical, mystic? Were you thinking of mummies? Magic? All these things are associated with the word Egypt. Maybe you were thinking of the pharaohs of Egypt, the rulers. They called themselves pharaohs. This old cat in the funny hat. Nah? What about tombs? Caskets? Sarcophagi? No? Still no? What about Egyptian art? Comes in all types and forms. You have stone art, wall art, hieroglyphics. You get my drift. It's even a couple I left out. Chariots. Storms. My point is, I didn't even realize myself until I started making this very video how big of an influence Egypt is on the world. They have the most preserved history. It's a rich history. It's a fascinating history. And over the last 102 years specifically, a lot of attention has been paid towards Egypt. Eyes began looking towards the Middle East around 1918. And ever since then, people have just gotten thirstier and thirstier because the more they find, the more it makes them want to look. So let's take a good look at Egypt. Okay, starting from a bird's eye, well, more than a bird's eye view, let's say a satellite's eye view. You see Egypt here. If you see my pointer here in the middle of the screen over Libya, we're going to go over to the right. And here is Egypt over towards the right. Now you see to the north, it is bordered by the Mediterranean Sea. And just real quick, the reason I'm doing this is because I want to go into the Egyptian land, the Egyptian people and culture in this video, because I want to give you a picture of what Joseph was exposed to when he came to Egypt. I want to give you an experience of what he was introduced to, what he had to adapt to. Okay, so you have Egypt over here to the right, and it's bordered to the north by the Mediterranean Sea. And that's going to be important because the Nile Delta is up here, and it borders the Mediterranean Sea, and the inhabitants of the Nile Delta are going to have access to trade with all these nearby nations. The Mediterranean Sea is a melting pot of trade, okay? So just keep that in mind. So anyway, to the west, you have Egypt bordered by Libya. To the south, they're bordered by the Sudan. And to the east, here, if you see my pointer, is the Sinai Desert. This little strip right here is the land of Canaan, modern day Israel. And this is the Red Sea down here. Well, this is the Persian Gulf, and this little blue strip here is the Red Sea. So let's zone in just a little bit. And one thing I want you to notice from this slide is the majority of Egypt is a desert. Do you see my pointer here, my black arrow in the middle of the screen? If you go over here to the left of Egypt, here's the border with Libya. The majority of this land, if you follow my pointer, is a desert. I want you to notice this little red crack or vein that goes all the way from bottom to the top of the right half, the eastern half of this country. This is the Nile River. It goes, it wiggles and squiggles and squirms all the way to the top. And I don't know if you can see it here at the top, it splinters and branches out into a bunch of various rivers and streams. And this area is the Nile Delta. And so I want you to understand that the Nile River is the life's blood of this land. No Nile River, no life. I mean, you can see some little red lines going through this desert, but for the most part, I hope you can see that the majority of this land is desert. In the eastern half, the right half of this country, Egypt, is the Nile, and it goes up into the Nile Delta. The Nile River, everything depends on the Nile River. Everything is intertwined with the Nile River. Their politics, their religion, their agriculture, all of their cities are situated along this life-giving river. Okay, so I can't emphasize that enough. So, getting in a little closer on this land, what I want you to notice is that it is divided into two, and it always has been. What the first rulers of this land came to understand is that in order to rule this land, you must keep this land united. It is really two lands that make up the land of Egypt. Upper Egypt and Lower Egypt. Now, if you see here, it looks backwards because Upper Egypt is at the bottom. It's in the south. And Lower Egypt is up north. It looks backwards. But from the point of view of the Egyptians, it's as I said before, everything has to do with the flow of the River Nile. And from the way they look at it, the flow of the River Nile comes through Upper Egypt first. So that is the head. That is Upper Egypt. It continues and flows into Lower Egypt where it splinters. This is the Nile Delta. It splinters and splits and branches off at the Nile Delta before it empties into the Mediterranean Sea. So because of the direction and flow of the Nile River, Upper Egypt is in the south and Lower Egypt is in the north. It's important to understand that so you don't get confused. It's one more thing I want you to understand from this slide. It's very important. Lower Egypt is the most fertile part of all of Egypt. And because of this fact, the inhabitants of Lower Egypt are very wealthy. This is going to remain a fact throughout Egyptian history, throughout ancient Egyptian history. Lower Egypt is in the wealthiest, most fertile part of Egypt. Lower Egypt does not need Upper Egypt. I want you to understand that. Let that sink in. Lower Egypt does not need Upper Egypt. It has money. It can operate independently. I like to think of it this way, and this is just my personal opinion. Lower Egypt is the money. Upper Egypt is the muscle. Because Upper Egypt, they're more about conquest. They're conquerors. They have these Nubians in the Sudan to the south of them, and they are always in a constant struggle with them. They're always pushing their way down south into Nubian territory for gold. Egyptians love gold. But if you don't remember much else from this video, I want you to remember that Lower Egypt does not need Upper Egypt. At the same time, Upper Egypt has the might, they have the muscle to conquer Lower Egypt. Money doesn't mean anything if you can't protect it. So it's a very interesting dichotomy that occurs in Egypt. Lower Egypt up north is the money. Upper Egypt in the south is the might. Another thing I want you to remember is that Upper Egypt in the south, their capital is usually going to be the city of Thebes. As you see right here, Thebes. Lower Egypt, their capital is going to be somewhere around Lower Egypt. Okay? Now, what did we go over in this slide? I want you to remember this. Okay, that Egypt is split into two. That has been and always will be a problem in the ancient world as far as Egypt goes. In ancient Egypt, keeping the two halves united is paramount. It is paramount. You cannot rule Egypt if your country is divided. Okay. We got that? We got that. Moving on. Another thing I want you to remember is that all along the Nile River, you see these little white dots. All along the Nile River, going all the way up into the Nile Delta, you have these districts, these cities, these areas. They're called nomes. And they're just like cities or districts. And they're ruled by what the Egyptians call nomarchs. And nomarchs are just like governors or rulers. So you have Egypt divided in half by Lower Egypt and Upper Egypt. And all along the Nile River, you have these nomes or these districts, and they're controlled by governors or rulers called nomarchs. And if you're a smart pharaoh, what you're going to do is you're going to appoint people who are close to you to be the nomarchs over these nomes. See, what the first rulers of Egypt realized was how difficult it was to keep this country united. So what they learned to do was to put close relatives, brothers, cousins, in-laws. They learned to put them in control over these districts or nomes, therefore ensuring their rule. The less chance of a revolt, the less chance of an uprising, the more solid your rule will be, the more solid your dynasty will be. And so, if you're a smart pharaoh, you're going to assign rule over these nomes. These nomarchs over these nomes are going to be very close to the royal house. Now, as I said before, this is a map of the Nile Delta. The river Nile goes all the way up from Upper Egypt into Lower Egypt. And once it gets to Lower Egypt, or the end of Lower Egypt, as you can see, it branches and splits off. It almost looks like a budding flower or the top of a tree where all the green and leaves are. But you can see this is clearly the most fertile part of this land. Nowhere else on a map does Egypt look like this. Nowhere else is it this green in Egypt other than the Nile Delta. And where this land got its name from was from the Greeks, because the Egyptians sure as hell didn't call it the Nile Delta. You see, when the Greeks got to this land, when the Minoans, who are the ancient Grecians, they were called Minoans, when they visited this land, they said to themselves as they arrived by boat, they said, this land resembles a triangle. And so they called it Delta. The River Nile, the triangular shape being Delta, the Nile Delta. And as I said before, these people up here, they are wealthy, they are hustlers, they are traders, they are sailors. They've got connections all over the Mediterranean Sea, and we'll touch on that some more later also. So, ancient Egyptian history is basically broken down into three parts: the Old Kingdom, the Middle Kingdom, and the New Kingdom. You have the pre-dynastic period that predates the Old Kingdom, but for the purposes of this video, we'll just be discussing the Old Kingdom, the Middle Kingdom, and the New Kingdom. Okay? So, as you'll see in this slide, the Middle Kingdom is flanked by two intermediate periods. The first intermediate period and the second intermediate period. The first intermediate period occurring just before the Middle Kingdom. The second intermediate period occurring just after the Middle Kingdom. So the Middle Kingdom is surrounded by these two periods called intermediate periods. And what these periods are periods of absolute chaos. To put it plainly, they are periods of civil war, and they are a nightmarish time for the Egyptians, for Egyptian history. Now, the Egyptians nowadays, Egyptian experts and Egyptologists, they try to like sweep this under the rug, like, oh, it was just, a little wrinkle, like a little bump in the road for us. They really underplay it, and we're going to talk about that some more also in the future, how you never see Egyptian hieroglyphs or Egyptian paintings of Egyptians getting their ass whooped. You only see them victorious and conquering and doing great things, and it's a little biased, and we ain't gonna get into that in this video, but we will get into it. But these intermediate periods, I cannot emphasize enough, they are periods of literal civil war. There is a clear upheaval of power. It is their worst nightmare. Egyptians are clear throughout history, ancient and current. They do not like chaos. They are against chaos. They are all about order. So, we'll start with the Old Kingdom. And when you think Old Kingdom, I want you to know one thing. If you remember nothing else, when you think Old Kingdom, remember this: building and construction. The Old Kingdom was an age of building and construction. So it consisted of three dynasties. They lasted from between 2687 to 2184 or around 2180 BC. And those dates, of course, can be contested. I'm no expert, okay? These are just general roundabout things that I pulled off of, Google, okay? Now, I don't want to get into all the arguments that people have over dates and, it's just not the subject. It's not the topic of my discussion. So round these areas, arguably 2687 to 2184 or 2180 BC. The third, the three dynasties consisted of dynasties 3 through 6. So the Old Kingdom consisted of the third dynasty through the sixth dynasty. And of course, you have several generations ruling in each dynasty. So like I said before, the Old Kingdom, it was an age of builders. If you were a pharaoh and you wanted to make your mark on the world and you wanted people to remember you, and pharaohs were all about being remembered, and they were all about the afterlife. And if you wanted to show your might and your rule and your wisdom and your success, you built something. You made a monument. You made a pyramid. You made a statue. You made an obelisk. One more thing that was established in the Old Kingdom, it was the age of gods. And, you know, the Egyptians had so many gods, I really don't even want to delve into that. I'm really not even interested in that area or subject. But you just cannot leave it out. The Egyptian gods are, you know, it's just so intricately intertwined throughout Egyptian culture and Egyptian history. So I just can't leave them out. So these were the first pyramids, and this is what they would have looked like. They're called step pyramids, and these were the pyramids of the Old Kingdom. These were of the first pyramids, and as you can see, it's just a platform with a smaller platform stacked on top, and each following platform is smaller, thus giving it a step-like appearance, and these are called step pyramids. So these are the three pyramids at Giza, and if you see my black arrow in the middle of the screen once again, you can literally see the progression of these pyramids over time. Here's a step pyramid right here. You can see in time they learned to fill in those steps of the step pyramid with more bricks to give it a more fuller appearance. And here the three pyramids at Giza, you can see how advanced their technology had gotten. They were able to fill in the steps of the pyramid to give it a fuller look, and then now you can still see the outer coating that they used to give it that sheer glowing white appearance. It must have been truly magnificent. I haven't seen it in person. It's magnificent just looking at it on a picture. I can't imagine what it looks like now in person, and I really can't imagine what it must have looked like in the ancient times. But the pyramids at Giza are thought to have been built during the Old Kingdom. So the step pyramids and the pyramids of Giza are Old Kingdom monuments, Old Kingdom structures. And because we don't fully know how the pyramids of Giza and other ancient monuments, because we don't know how they were built, I have to mention that a lot of people believe that they were built much earlier than experts give them credit. Some people believe that they were built by aliens. Some people, you know, I'm not going to delve or get straight off into, you know, all that. Y'all know, if y'all saw my Giants videos, I don't believe in no damn aliens anyway. So, I mean, but hey, you know, I could be wrong, you know. But they do make, you know, people do make compelling arguments, you know, to back up their case. But experts today believe that these pyramids at Giza, these gigantic monumental structures, one of the 7 ancient wonders of the world, experts believe that they were built during the Old Kingdom.
Stars.
This is the Sphinx. It is also believed to have been built during the Old Kingdom. So you see, these people were builders. And over the generations, they perfected their craft. I could make, well, there are plenty of videos, that pay homage to the advanced architecture, the miracle and wonder working architecture of the Egyptians. Okay, now the Egyptian gods. So I mentioned them briefly before, and we're gonna have to touch on them momentarily, because there is no separating Egyptian culture from the Egyptian gods. Okay, and the Egyptians have hundreds of gods, literally hundreds of gods, and there's no way I'm going to, discuss all these different gods and the roles they play. But we'll just touch on some of the most popular ones. Starting off is Amun Ra. He is the sun god. He's the big head honcho. He's the god that initially becomes conscious of himself and aware of himself and creates everything else in existence. Now, there's a prophecy that one of his descendants will take him over, so he forbids his daughter from having children, which she does, and she has. Oh, I got ahead of myself. This is another picture of Amun Ra, and the reason I got this slide up, because I forgot I had multiple slides up of him. The reason I have this slide up is because I want you to see how raw he look. I'm sorry, I used to collect comic books, and maybe I'm just being a big kid right now, but the artwork, he just look raw. Now, I know some of y'all church folks condemning me to hell right now for saying an Egyptian God looks cool. Thank God, God is God, and you're not. That's all I have to say about that. So, Amun Ra, as you see in this slide, in the slide before, I'm not sure if it was in the first slide. Let me see. No, you can't see it on this slide, but he always has this all-seeing eye. You can see it in this slide. He has it on top of his staff, this all-seeing eye, because that's what he initially starts out as. It's a weird story. Egyptian mythology and the background of their gods, it's just too weird and complex. I don't even want to dig deep into it. Here it is again, this all-seeing eye. And just a cool visual, a cool image of the Egyptian god Amun Ra. So, one of the gods, his daughter Nut, or I think her name is, one of the gods she has is Osiris. And he is going to become the god ruling on earth. He is going to teach man agriculture and government and just all the tools man needs to become civilized. And he's depicted as, a generous God and a righteous God and a good God, because he's kind to man and he shows man all of these things. He's usually depicted as this green-skinned behemoth. This is Isis, Osiris's sister. And Osiris takes his sister Isis to be his wife. Now, Isis is a really big god. She is a heavyweight. And Osiris takes her to be his wife. And I want you to take note of this, because this proves what I was saying about the Egyptian people being so closely intertwined with their gods. The Egyptian people are going to they're going to emulate the gods in this fashion of marrying their sister. The pharaohs of Egypt, they married their sisters to keep their bloodline pure. And if they couldn't marry their sisters, they married the closest thing that they could find to their sisters. They married their half sisters or their cousins, or they were emulating the gods. They were taking up this practice that the gods practiced, because it was necessary for them to link themselves to the gods. It was necessary for them to identify themselves with the gods. It was necessary for them to identify themselves with the gods, and the people know that, and the priesthood know that. So, take a note of that. Osiris marries his sister. And the pharaohs, the rulers of Egypt, all of them, practically all of them, take up this practice. This is the god Set. Now, it's a funny story about Set. He's Osiris's brother. And he's also Isis's brother. And there's a funny story about those three, because as the story goes, Set betrays Osiris and kills him. And Isis brings him back to life and has a child by him. And I'm not going to get into the story just now, but it is a truly funny story indeed, because it changes over time. Set starts out as a good god, and then over time he becomes this evil god who betrays his brother, kills him, chops him up into pieces, does all these awful things. It's very peculiar, and Soapman is going to unravel the truth of what he believes to be the truth. But not in this video. That's the subject of another video. So anyway, the funny thing about Seth is nobody knows what he really is. I mean, he looks funny. He kind of looks like, I don't know. Some people think he's a donkey. Some people think he's a wolf. Some people think he's a cross between a donkey and a wolf. Some people think he's just a whole new, brand new animal. Some people think he's a ancient animal that's went extinct. He's a really odd looking god. And that's one of the things that sticks out to me, and I think a lot of other people, is what the hell exactly is he? Anyway, he starts out being the god of love and charity. He's the god that, helps people transition from this life to the afterlife, and he gets them going on their way once they enter the afterlife. He's seen as charitable. But sometime after the Old Kingdom, sometime at the end of the Old Kingdom and before the beginning of the New Kingdom, he becomes evil, and we'll discuss that in a later video. This is Horus. He is the hawk-headed son of Osiris and Isis. He is the son that Isis had with Osiris when she brought him back to life after Seth kills Osiris. His wife and sister Isis brings Osiris back to life, and they have Horus, the hawk-headed god, who is really an Egyptian favorite among the gods. He is a darling among the gods, and it's not hard to see why. He looks cool as hell, like Amun-Ra. He is a falcon-headed god like Amun-Ra. I'm not sure if they like a hawk or a falcon. When I read up on it, it says falcon, but it kind of look like a hawk to me. Let Soapman know what you think. Anyway, he looks cool as hell, and that's probably why he's one of the favorites. Plus, he is the nephew of Seth, and he avenges his father Osiris as the story goes, and he battles Seth, and it's a long and arduous battle where he eventually ends up winning, ends up on top. And this is by far the coolest picture, one of the coolest slides in all my videos. This is definitely my favorite slide of Horus, the Egyptian god Horus. So, as I mentioned before, you had these districts called nomes that ran all up along the Nile River. And the rulers over these districts were called nomarchs, and they served as the same as governors, or like if you were in the north, like if you were way off in like Mario, England, you would have called them a duke. But the Egyptians called these districts nomes, and they called the rulers over these nomes, or the governors over these nomes, nomarchs. And this is just a picture to show you, just on a map, how crazy complex the districts that these nomarchs ruled over, how crazy it looks on a map. It's pretty complicated. And when you get to the Nile Delta, it looks even more complicated. This looks like a collage, or like one of those old religious church windows in one of those old religious churches. And these are the different nomes of the Nile Delta. So what happens at the end of the Old Kingdom is the ruling class, the pharaohs of the 6th dynasty, the last pharaohs of the 6th dynasty, they were in conflict with the priesthood of Egypt. The priesthood of Egypt at that time had grown very powerful, and their conflict with the royal house weakened the hand of the pharaohs of the 6th dynasty. You know, the priesthood, they had a lot of influence, and they wield a lot of power, but at this point in time in history, they had an enormous amount of power. And you know, I'm not even sure what the disagreement was with the last rulers of the 6th dynasty, these 6th dynasty pharaohs. But whatever the problem, it weakened the hand of the 6th dynasty rulers politically, and so emboldened the nomarchs of these various nomes. So as you know, the hand of the pharaohs weakened, it emboldened the nomarchs of these nomes. These nomarchs start feeling themselves. They start smelling themselves. They start becoming independent. They start breaking off from under the rule of the pharaohs. It got so bad that Lower Egypt broke off itself from Upper Egypt and claimed independence. Manetho, a historian, states that the 7th dynasty had 70 kings in 70 days. And so we're entering the first intermediate period by the end of the 6th dynasty, beginning of the 7th dynasty. The general roundabout time period is 2181 BC to a roundabout time frame is 2040 BC. And Manetho is a 3rd century Egyptian historian. He's well respected, and he's one of the main sources that we have on these intermediate periods. We don't have very many sources or evidence or archaeology regarding these intermediate periods. Very little is known about these periods. What evidence that we know exists is buried under marshland in Egypt. We can't get to it. But we do have some evidence, and we will talk about that evidence in upcoming videos. One of the pieces of evidence, one insight that we have into these periods is the Egyptian, to tell you the truth, I'm not sure if he's Egyptian. His name is Manetho, and he's a 3rd century historian. And he says there was, during the 7th dynasty in Egypt, there were 70 kings in 70 days. Now, obviously, he's exaggerating, but he's still giving you a peek, you know, even by his exaggeration, as the chaos that was occurring. You know, the dynasties, the rule of these pharaohs were short. You had you had nomarchs breaking off, declaring their independence. You had Lower Egypt breaking off completely, declaring its independence. The royal house is feuding with the priesthood. The uprising of nomarchs, Lower Egypt becomes independent. It gets so bad that a 10th dynasty is established in Heracleopolis. Imagine that. Not only are nomarchs, these governors, breaking off, declaring independence, Lower Egypt, the northern half of Egypt, has completely broken off and declared independence. But now, someone has the nerve to establish a rival dynasty? Unheard of. You can only imagine. The 10th dynasty was established during the ninth dynasty. So you have a ninth dynasty, and now one of these gnomes or one of these nomarchs is establishing a rival 10th dynasty with you. Imagine if you're the pharaoh of this ninth dynasty. The nerve of someone saying, oh no, I'm king also. I'm pharaoh also. This is a direct slap in the face. This is as bad gets for Egypt. So what happens is you have a 7th dynasty where Manetho says 70 rulers ruled in 70 days. You have a weak 7th dynasty, a weak 8th dynasty, a 9th dynasty that's so weak, a 10th dynasty is established. By the 11th dynasty, which is ruling down here in Thebes, this 11th dynasty is going to work its way up. First, it's going to go down south and battle the Nubians and establish borders down there. Then it's going to work its way up each generation, and by this time, the rulers of Thebes, the rulers of Upper Egypt in the south, they aren't calling themselves pharaohs. They're calling themselves intefs. And each generation, they're going to work their way up the Nile until by the end of the 11th dynasty, they have completely worked their way up through the Nile, to the Nile Delta, dominating nomes along the way until they reunify the land of Egypt. These intefs, by the end of the 11th dynasty, create a platform, create a solid, unified Egypt, a solid foundation in which brings about the Middle Kingdom. Now, the Middle Kingdom is said to approximately, once again, to have been from around 2130 or 2000 BC to 700 BC. By 700 BC, the central government in Egypt will have totally broken down. So the Middle Kingdom is, the 11th dynasty, they sew it up and they bring peace and stability enough to where the Middle Kingdom, it comes about. Now, a lot of people don't like to include the 11th dynasty in the Middle Kingdom, but I do, because if it wasn't for the 11th dynasty, there would have been no Middle Kingdom. If it wasn't for the 11th dynasty, the 12th dynasty would not have had the fruit of their labor to enjoy, and they certainly did take advantage of the foundation, the solid foundation formed and left to them by the 11th dynasty. Now, not very many pyramids built in the 11th dynasty. The pharaohs of this time ditched the pyramids for tombs. Another thing about the 11th dynasty is it is heavily influenced by the Old Kingdom. The rulers of the 11th of the Middle Kingdom, they want to get back to the times of the Old Kingdom. They want the prosperity of the Old Kingdom. They want the peace and organization of the Old Kingdom. And so you can see in the excavations of Middle Kingdom era structures and writings and tombs and mummies that there was a yearning. There was a yearning to be like the Old Kingdom. And once again, here at the bottom, like I say, most people say the Middle Kingdom was just the 12th dynasty. I include the 11th dynasty because I believe in giving credit where credit is due. Suit yourself, though. So, we're in the Middle Kingdom now. This is an image of Senusret III. And he is considered the most successful Middle Kingdom 12th dynasty pharaoh. I want you to take a good look at him. Take a good look at his image. Now take a good look at his image compared to the images of other pharaohs. And let me know if you notice anything odd, okay? So this is Senusret III. This is another random pharaoh. Senusret III, another random pharaoh. Senusret III. This pharaoh was said to have been 6 feet 6 tall. He was said to have made incursions as far as Europe. Ancient Grecians wrote about him. In Egypt, he was worshipped as a god. During his reign, he pushed further into the land of Nubia, into the Sudan, and conquered more territory down there than any pharaoh before him. True success story. Look at his image. What is it that is odd about this image? Look again. This is Senusret III, another random pharaoh. What's odd about Senusret III is that he looks so sad. He's got a frown on his chin. His eyes are sleepy. His ears are outcropped. Experts believe this is because he's listening to the voice and concerns of his people. This is believed by experts to be the Pharaoh of Joseph. And the famine is believed to have occurred during his reign and during the reign of possibly his father. Because you see Joseph ruled, he lived 110 years. He lived in Egypt during the lifespan of several pharaohs. Senusret III co-ruled with his son Amenhotep, I believe his name was. I think the second, or I don't know which one. It's so many. Anyways, so during this pharaoh's lifetime, during his reign, Joseph would have been alive. He would have been living in avarice. If the evidence that Manfred Bitak has uncovered is spot on and accurate, if it is evidence of Joseph living there, he would have lived there in the Middle Kingdom during the time of Senusret III. Now let's look at what the Bible says. It says, "And Pharaoh said unto Joseph, Say unto thy brethren, This do ye, lade your beasts, and go, get you unto the land of Canaan, and take your father and your households, and come unto me, and I will give you the good of the land of Egypt. And ye shall eat the fat of the land. Now thou art commanded. This do ye, take your wagons out of the land of Egypt for your little ones, and for your wives, and bring your father, and come." That was what my mom was pointing out, the mistake I made. This is when Jacob came to the land of Egypt, not initially. Nice work, Mom. Also regard not your stuff. Listen to what Pharaoh is saying. He is rolling out the red carpet, and I cannot emphasize this enough. This does not happen in Egypt. These people are being treated with special treatment because of the service of Joseph. The service of Joseph was that significant. It was that great that Pharaoh extended the olive branch and rolled out the red carpet to his whole entire family. He says, "Also regard not your stuff, for the good of all the land of Egypt is yours." And the children of Israel did so. And the Bible goes on to say, "And Pharaoh spake unto Joseph, saying, Thy father and thy brethren are come unto thee. In the best of the land make thy father and thy brethren to dwell. In the land of Goshen let them dwell." All the soul, and that was Genesis 47 verses, that was Genesis chapter 47 verses 5 and 6. Genesis chapter 46 verses 26 and 27 say this: "All the souls that came with Jacob into Egypt, which came out of his loins, besides Jacob's sons' wives, all the souls were 66, that's 66. And the sons of Joseph, which were born him in Egypt, were 2 souls. All the souls of the house of Jacob, which came to Egypt, were 70. So what they are saying is all the souls that came out of Joseph. I'm sorry. I'm getting excited. No mistakes here. Let me correct myself. What that passage is saying is all the souls that came out of Jacob's loins, all the souls that were born unto Jacob, not including his sons' wives, all those were 66. And then it goes on to say, now Joseph, all the ones that came out of his loins were 2. He had 2 sons. Including Joseph and Jacob, that makes 70. It was 66. Joseph's 2 sons make 68, and Jacob and Joseph make 70. So everyone, all the souls of Jacob, including Jacob himself, including Joseph, including Joseph's 2 sons, were 70 souls. Tattoo that number on your brain, please. The Bible says 70 souls left the land of Canaan and migrated into Egypt. The specific place in Egypt it says they came to was the land of Goshen, the best part of the land. Now, let's talk about the Hyksos. Who are they? I believe they were the Hebrews, but before we delve into the realm of possibility and opinion, let us talk about what we know about these people. What are the facts? What we know is that they were a Semitic people. How do we know this, Troy? Because all the evidence indicates that. Remember in my last video, the statue of Joseph? He was painted with a yellow color. The Egyptians painted Semitic people this color. That is how they identified northerners, as being light-skinned. Manfred Betak is excavating at a city called Avaris, which is in the land of Goshen, the Nile Delta, the best part of Egypt. This city, Avaris, is later going to be known as the Hyksos capital. And it is where the Hyksos rulers will rule from when they take over Egypt, which they will eventually do. Now, this is what else we know about them. They migrated to Egypt from the land of Canaan. These people don't call themselves Hebrews, and the Egyptians do not call them Hebrews. And so that's why there's a lot of argument and pushback against them being Hebrews. There is no definitive evidence. There is no smoking gun to say they were Hebrews. Their story is just eerily similar to the Hebrews in that they migrated from the land of Canaan. They are a Semitic people, and the Hebrews were a Semitic people also. People against them being Hebrews like to say that they were Phoenicians who were also Semitic, or Amorites who were also Semitic, or Bedouin tribesmen and herdsmen who are also Semitic. But what I argue is there is no historical evidence of different Semitic people coming and settling in Egypt. You cannot just come and settle in Egypt because you feel like it. Now, there were Semitic people in Egypt, but there was a backstory and a reason why those people were there. For instance, the Egyptians captured Bedouin tribesmen when they had skirmishes with them sometimes. And so they made slaves out of them. And so there were slave settlements of Bedouin herdsmen at one point in time in Egyptian history. But nowhere in Egyptian history did anyone from any foreign land just come to Egypt and settle and set up shop. The Egyptians would not have allowed it. You don't just do that in one of the most powerful nations in ancient times. You just don't come and set up shop without permission indiscriminately. You're asking for big trouble. So another thing that we know from the Hyksos is that the Egyptians originally called them Hyksos. Now, I probably sound retarded saying that. But when the Greeks visited this land, they ran into a foreign people living in the Nile Delta here. And they didn't call them Hyksos. They called them Hyksos. Now, Josephus, the Jewish historian, translates the Greek word Hyksos into meaning shepherd kings. But what it actually translates into meaning is foreign rulers. And the Greeks, when they visited the Nile Delta and even established settlements themselves there as traders and merchants, they called these foreigners, these Semitic people, Hyksos. Now, there's no Egyptian record of Semitic people coming to settle in Egypt, but there is a biblical record of no mistakes. There is no Egyptian record of Semitic people settling in Egypt. However, there is a biblical Hebrew record of Semitic Hebrews settling in Egypt. 70 souls in total, the Bible says. And when they migrated, the Egyptians drew pictures of them. These are the facts. We know that they were shepherds, like the Hebrews. I don't think that's coincidental. You see, in their hands they have throw sticks. These are weapons that we know were used by Semites. We know a lot about Semites. We know so much about Semites because they stretch all along the Fertile Crescent. We talked about the King's Highway and the Fertile Crescent. Babylonians over in the land of Babylonia and Sumeria, they are Eastern Semites. Amorites over here closer towards the Mediterranean Sea are Western Semites. We know a lot about their language, a lot about their culture. So we know these people that migrated to Egypt were Semitic. We know that. Look at the pictures. They're shepherds. They're herding animals. They have weapons, throw sticks, bows and arrows, spears. They're armed. Look at their colorful garments. This correlates with Semitic people. These are not my pictures. These pictures are not altered. This is how the Egyptians depicted these people. I know what some of the people viewing this may be saying. I know what's going through your little minds. Soapman can read your mind. Oh yes, it's true. Soapman has psychic abilities, and I'm reading your mind this very instant. And I can't even say the filth on live that you're thinking. I can't even repeat it. You should be ashamed. These aren't my pictures. The Egyptians painted these pictures. Hyksos, Hyksos, Hyksos. Hebrew, Hebrew. Habaro. Okay, so we getting towards the end of this program, okay? In 1650 BC, some argue it was as early as 1690 BC. A lot of historians say that the Hyksos, which consisted of various Semitic people, Phoenician, Amorites, Bedouin tribesmen, maybe some Hebrews, hell, who knows, who cares? They say around 1690 or 1650 BC that they just swooped in, that they took advantage of a weak 13th dynasty and just swooped in and took over Lower Egypt. At the same time that this was happening, the kingdom of Cush was emboldened by, the Upper Egypt being occupied in civil war with the Hyksos of Lower Egypt, the kingdom of Cush becomes emboldened. They just start gobbling up and eating up territory and migrating and taking over territory and land, pushing their way upward. And so you have this upper kingdom with the capital in Thebes being sandwiched in the middle by the kingdom of Cush to the south and the Hyksos dynasty, the 15th dynasty, rulers of Lower Egypt to the north. But Manfred Betak says, no, 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 no. No, 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 no. That's not what happened at all. Manfred Betak says that is hogwash. He says what the evidence that he's excavated at the ancient city of Avaris, the Hyksos capital, the evidence he's discovered says these people did not invade. Egyptian historian Manetho says that the Hyksos took over Egypt without striking a single blow. And that correlates to what Manfred Betak is saying, because Manfred Betak is saying no. He says that this city of Avaris started out with a small settlement of Semites. Listen to the number he says. 70 to no more than 100 individuals. That is his number. Where did you hear that? The Bible says a total of 70 souls migrated into Lower Egypt, the Nile Delta. 70 souls of Jacob, his entire house. Thousands of years later, Manfred Betak, excavating at the ancient Hyksos capital of Avaris, says that this city started out with no more than 70 to 100 souls. He literally uses the word 70. He literally uses the number 70. He says no more than a dozen or so houses. He literally uses the word, the number dozen, 12. 12 houses of Jacob. He doesn't say 12 houses of Jacob, but there are 12 houses of Jacob that settled there. And Manfred Betak uses the two numbers 70 and a dozen. I find that pinprickling. And so Manfred Betak says, over the generations, this small settlement balloons into one of, if not one of, the biggest, most populated city of the ancient world. Upwards of 25,000 people. I have seen people say as many as 50 or 75,000 people. For the ancient world, that is a megalotropolis, okay? Manfred Betak has discovered 3 other cities similar to the city of Avaris. Though Avaris was the established capital of the Hyksos, population-wise, Manfred Betak has discovered 4 cities in all like this. And in many of the cities, these people are buried like foreign Semitic people would be buried. They're buried on their side. They're buried. Many of them were found buried with their animals, with their donkeys. Egyptians would never be buried with their animals. They would never be buried on their side. They would never be buried in this fashion. They have an entire theology that they adhere to as far as the afterlife. And they would never allow themselves or their family members to be buried in this fashion. But I don't want to get off on a tangent. This population, according to Manfred Betak, started off with no more than 70 to 100 people, no more than a dozen or more houses, and ballooned into the most populous, numerous city of the ancient world. And what does the Bible say in Exodus 1 and 7? It says, And the children of Israel, were fruitful and increased abundantly and multiplied, in bold, underlined, italicized writing, and waxed exceedingly mighty, and the land was filled with them. Listen to what else it says. We're done here. Last slide. Oh, second to the last slide. Listen to what it says, because it's important. Now there arose up a new king over Egypt, which knew not Joseph. And he said unto his people, behold, the people of Israel, and he said unto his people, behold, the people of the children of Israel are more and mightier than we. Come on, let us deal wisely with them, lest they multiply. And it come to pass that when there falleth out any war, they join also our enemies and fight against us, and so get them up out of the land. Therefore they did set over them taskmasters to afflict them with burdens, and they built for Pharaoh treasure cities, Pithom and Ramses. That's the line right there that has all the confusion. It says, and they built for Pharaoh treasure cities, Pithom and Ramses. We discussed that before. I won't go into it now. But that line right there has caused generations of confusion. And it goes on to say, but the more they afflicted them, the more they multiplied and grew. Let me read that again. But the more they afflicted them, the more they multiplied and grew. And they were grieved because of the children of Israel. Powerful stuff, y'all. Last slide. And it says, and the Egyptians made the children of Israel to serve with rigor, and they made their lives bitter with hard bondage in mortar and in brick, and in all matter and in all manner of service in the field. All their service wherein they made them serve was with rigor. Man, I really don't have time to emphasize this like I want to, but I hope you are I hope all this is sinking in. If we go back just one slide, just to emphasize, go back 2 slides, just give me 30 seconds. I just want to emphasize, look what this says. And the children of Israel were fruitful. That means they were prosperous. They were successful. This says, and increased abundantly. That means in wealth, in stature, in money, and in numbers. And it says, if you have any doubt, it says, and multiplied and waxed exceedingly mighty. This is not me emphasizing these points. Listen to these adjectives and nouns and adverbs and verbs. Listen to them all. This is not me embellishing it and emphasizing the fact. This is the Bible's words. And the land was filled with them. Go back to what Manfred Betak said. The most numerous populated city in the ancient world. Their numbers blew out of control. You almost can't even fault the Egyptians. So this second to the last slide says, there arose up a new Pharaoh after Joseph died and that generation died. There eventually arose up a new Pharaoh, and he recognized that these people are too numerous. They are a threat. And he said, we need to deal with that threat. And so what he did was he put them to hard labor. He put them to work. And this last slide says that the Egyptians made them serve with rigor. They worked them hard. They slaved them. Okay? Overkill. They slaved them and made their whole entire life bitter with hard bondage. In all manner that they served them with rigor, whether it was in the field or no matter what it was. They just antagonized these people. They just made these people life a living hell. And then if that wasn't enough, it says, and Pharaoh charged his people, saying, every son that is born ye shall cast. He says, and Pharaoh charged his people, saying, every son that is born ye shall cast into the river, and every daughter ye shall save alive. So to add insult to injury, if it wasn't bad enough that he enslaved these people and put them to hard labor, hard bondage, he also instituted this law that all the male children had to be killed. Imagine having to turn over your son, your baby son, and throw him into the Nile River or kill him. Imagine people reporting that you had a kid, and it might be a boy. This is the law that Pharaoh set over these people. So we're gonna end it there. But just a quick recap before we go. So, the Egyptians are in this real bind. Joseph and his people, they come over there initially as honored guests of the royal house of Pharaoh himself because Joseph saved the land from famine. But as the generations go on, hundreds of years, some experts believe even as early as 1780, they start having problems with these people. The numbers are blowing up out of proportion. They are literally spilling over the city walls. These people are so numerous that the Egyptians can't contain them. They fear them. They're like, these people are a threat. What if we get into war and these people turn on us? We need to do something about this. Not only that, these people are wealthy. They are powerful. We need to do something about this. And so they inflict these hard laws of labor onto these people, forcing them into slave labor. And if that's not bad enough, they institute a law saying that all the males must be killed and only the daughters can be saved. Now, as gruesome as all this sounds, and I'm not even trying to make it sound gruesome, I'm trying to paint an accurate picture of what is going on at this time period. Because it's at this time period that a very special individual is going to be born. And that individual we will talk about on the next Son of a Preacher Man. So, I want to thank you for joining me. I'll see you next time. Soapman, outie.